Today we're going to finish up section 3.2. So we're still going to look at the variance and standard deviation, just some new formulas here. This is when we're looking at a frequency distribution table. So finding the variance and standard deviation is, we're going to make some more columns, and it's similar to finding the mean for group data. We're going to use the midpoints of each class along with the frequency. So here again, I'm just giving you the class boundaries. Please pause the video to copy this down, but it says the following data represent the number of miles that 20 runners ran during 1 week. So the two extra columns we're going to need, just like when we find the mean, we want to multiply the frequency by the midpoint. So here I'm just giving you the midpoints and the frequencies. We just want to go ahead and multiply those together. And then a new one is that we need to square the x values first and then multiply it by the frequency. So pause the video to fill out those two columns, and then I'll show you what you should be getting just to double check your results. All right, so again, in the first one, we just multiply 1 times 8. But for the second, the last column over here, rather, we're doing 1 times 8 squared. Then 2 times 13 is giving us 26. 2 times 13 squared is 338. So again, if you need more time, pause the video again to finish. But here are the remaining results. And we want to total these numbers, or these columns as well. Now, this requires a lot of double checking here. We don't want to miss a number, mistype a number on the calculator. If these totals are off, our entire problem is off. So always double check. But these are the values we should be getting. All right, so the variance formula for grouped data, again, we're using an S squared for the variance. It's a sample. So it's our number of elements, in this case is going to be 20, times the sum of our very last column. So that's going to be the 13,310, minus the sum of just our frequency times our midpoints. Then we're going to square that. So that's going to be the 490 squared, all over n times n minus 1, so 20 times 19. So we want to substitute this in. Pause the video to calculate that. Again, remember the rounding rule. We're going to round to one more place value than our data was. Now, in this case, if we're looking at our class boundaries, we can consider our class limits to still be like 6 to 10. So we're looking at whole numbers for our raw data, even though we can't technically see our raw data. So we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Once you get that value, take the square root for the standard deviation. All right, so our variance. Now this equal sign with a little dot, I use this in calculus. That's just another way to write approximately. Take the square root of that, and our standard deviation of the sample is roughly 8.3. All right, so keep in mind, we're going to practice one of each again. Raw data is where we actually see the list of all the individual data values. Group data is what we were just looking at. We cannot view the raw data. We're given a frequency distribution that is already started for us. It's already created. All right, so let's practice an example of each. Actually, before we do that, I want to talk about a range rule of thumb, and this is just a rough estimate of the standard deviation. It's simply taking the range, which is the difference between your max and your min values, and dividing it by 4. It's only an approximation, and it should be used when the distribution is unimodal and roughly symmetric. Okay, next I'm going to move on to the example, so if you still need to write this down, pause the video. All right, so example 1, this is time spent in rush hour traffic. We're going to find the range, the variation, and the standard deviation. Use your calculator for this, but make sure you look back in your notes. This is all raw data, so this is what we were doing for the first part of section 3.2. Locate the formula to find the sample standard deviation, the sample variance first, and then the sample standard deviation. But you can make a list and spreadsheet on your calculator, type these values in. And again, we do that because then it finds the sum of x and then the sum of x squared. So pause the video to type all that in. All right, now the range, we're not going to need the calculator for that. We would just take the difference between our largest value and our smallest value. So it looks like our smallest value is going to be the 49, and our largest value is 71. So subtracting that, 71 minus 45 will give us, or 49 will give us 22. Now from the list and spreadsheet, the stats calculations, you should get the sum of x is equal to 675. The sum of x squared is 38,359. Now from our calculator, it should say the sample standard deviation is roughly 6.0. But to get we want to use the formula. I didn't show that part here, but again, it would be the n times the sum of x squared minus the 675. So it's going to be, we've got 12 times the 38,359 minus the 675 squared all over 12 times 11. So if you do that calculation, you should get the 35.5. Take the square root of that, and then s should equal 6.0. Again, we want to round to the nearest tenth, but let me just write that out for you. So the formula here for variance, we were saying s squared is going to equal, remember it's n, which is the 12 data values we have up here, times the 38,359 minus the 675 squared all over 12 times 11. Now we're going to apply the range rule of thumb. So we're going to take that 22 and divide it by 4. And it's roughly 5.5, which is pretty close to the 6.0. Again, it's just a rough estimate of the standard deviation. All right, so let's try another grouped data. Now this is directly from the book, but we do like to talk statistics, and every once in a while in the news we do talk about this. So here the data shows the number of murders in 25 selected cities. We want to find the variance and the standard deviation. All right, so I'm giving you the class limits and the frequencies. So take your time to copy this down and then fill out the others. So pause the video, find the midpoints, then multiply the frequency by the midpoint, then multiply the frequency times the square of the midpoint. Pause the video to do that. All right, if you need more time, pause the video again. I'm just going to show the results here. Here are all the midpoints. Multiplying. We're going to get into some rather large numbers. And then we want to total this, so double check that total. It's even going to get larger. It's some huge numbers there. But then go ahead and double check your total, or this total here, add those all up. Again, pause the video if you need more time. All right, so again, following the formula, what we're going to write out here are variance. All right, so the easiest way to remember this, no matter if we're using raw data or the group data, it's always going to be the sample size times the larger of the two numbers first. So we're going to have times the 1,558,720 minus the smaller number squared all over the product of our sample size times our sample size minus 1. So if you calculated all of this and rounded to the nearest tenth, again, we could tell our class limits there are in the whole numbers. So we're getting our sample, our variance here, that should be squared. Then take the square root of that number, and we're getting our standard deviation. All right, so again, yesterday I gave everyone time to work on problems 1 through 6. I'm going to show all these answers on Tuesday. And then I was planning on Tuesday, but I think I'm going to push it back to Wednesday. We're going to do a little golf activity. So more directions will come. I'll type up the directions here for something for you to do at home. Normally we do like a flipping penny contest, but I think this year Mr. Hubisak and myself, we are going to take our groups outside and actually do golf. So I will let you know if this is an activity, if you have your own golf clubs, you could do this at home if you want to. If not, I'll email you the directions and see what you're able to do from home. But let me know if you have any questions over this. Like I said, I'll show the answers to 1 through 6, 7, and 8 now on Tuesday.